Chapter 5, Working in a Group. Overview. This chapter gives you some useful tips on how to build and maintain productive group work. Group work is important in medicine both as an undergraduate and as a doctor, so we hope that this chapter will help act as a springboard for effective team working and team learning for many years to come. Introduction. As a medical student and as a doctor for the rest of your professional life, you will be required to study and work with others. We have already highlighted the importance of working in a study group, but we haven't given you much guidance on how to get one together, how to make it work. This chapter will help you identify your personal preferences when it comes to group work and will describe some of the pros and cons. We will dip into some practical theory from educational psychology to consider why and how things can go wrong and what the key strategies are for making it go right. The second half of this chapter will look at the specific challenges of problem-based learning groups, self-study groups, and interprofessional learning. You will also find useful advice relevant to study groups for clinical skills in Chapter 3 and clinical communication skills in Chapter 4. What do you think? Different people have very different perspectives on learning in a group. Some love it, some hate it. This perspective is partly due to some level of inbuilt preference, but is largely due to past experience. Consider the exercise you did in Chapter 137. How did you answer the question on group work? Think back to a typical example of group work from your past. Try to recall the session in your mind or even in writing. Ask yourself the following questions. What was the task? In what way did the nature of the task affect how the group worked together? What about the makeup of the group? What were the behaviors between people in the group? Which were helpful? Which were unhelpful? Were any behaviors particularly destructive? What did the group do about these? Spend another couple of minutes thinking about the following question. What would be the characteristics of a task that encouraged productive group work? What would be the perfect list of different characters or personalities or skills in the group for productive collaboration? You might want, for example, someone who is good at finding information, someone else who is good at motivating the group. What others can you think of? Your prior experience is important. If you have had positive experiences in the past, then you are likely to be the sort of person who will engage positively with future experiences. The opposite is true too. This is important to be aware of. Other members of the group might behave in ways that help or hinder the group's productivity, but so do you. Go back to the questions above and consider what behaviors that you had in the group and what effect it had. Some friends invited me to join their study group for clinical skills. We set a topic in advance, but I didn't really prepare. They ended up teaching me, and one of them got quite angry that they were only covering the basics, and I got angry back. I never went back, which is a shame. It's hard to learn clinical skills on your own. Column, first year medical student. Pros and cons. There are, of course, pros and cons to working in a group. Some are real, others are more subjective. Some are fixed, whereas others can be influenced in ways that we will discuss below. We don't plan to produce an exhaustive list here, and we're sure that you could add more, but we will try and provide a balanced list. Table 5.1 Advantages of working in a group. Collective knowledge is more than individual knowledge. You will never know everything. Others will always know things that you don't know, and you will always know things that others don't know. You can always learn from others. Collective skills are more than individual skills. As you will see later, different people tend to have different roles within a group. You may not be as good at finding information as one of your peers, but perhaps you are better at spotting links across topics or getting an overview or helicopter view of the topic. Together you are stronger than apart. Learning through teaching. One of the best ways of checking that you understand something is by explaining it to someone else. If you can do this and answer their questions, it will consolidate the facts in your head much more deeply. Depth and breadth. We have mentioned the problem of depth and breadth quite a lot. Throughout your time at medical school, you will struggle with knowing when you know enough. The three main ways of telling are through exam results, by looking at the learning objectives, and by measuring yourself against your peers. Hidden curriculum. For good or for bad, the grapevine carries a lot of information about the curriculum. Students who work alone are often unaware of things that everyone else knows. Motivation and empathy. We all have bad days, days that we don't seem to be able to get round to doing work, that nothing seems to make sense. If someone you trust tells you that they had a similar experience last week, then you might decide to give it another go tomorrow. Perhaps they also struggled with the same topic and found a really useful way of looking at it that will help you too. Divide and conquer. For some tasks, many hands really can make light work, especially if you coordinate your efforts well. Often tasks can be divided up between you and then recombined to make a good finished product far more quickly and easily than it would take one person alone. Table 5.2 Disadvantages of working in a group. You know a lot more than them. When you know a lot more than the rest of the group on a topic, then you can spend a disproportionate amount of time explaining very basic things when you could be using that time more productively alone. You know a lot less than the rest. If most people in the group seem to know a lot more about the topic than you, the level of discussion can be so high that you have trouble following. You might just sit there listening to a foreign language and get frustrated at the waste of time or demoralized at your lack of knowledge. Disorder and disharmony. We have all worked in groups where people tended to shout each other down a lot, play one-upmanship and try and win points over the others. Often this is a normal stage that a group can go through, but sometimes the group can be stuck in chaos and struggle to be productive. Individual behaviors. Sometimes one or two individuals can have behaviors that make it difficult for the group to function. Perhaps they get angry or put others down. They often don't realize, but sometimes they do. Not sharing the workload. Collins' quote highlights a relatively common phenomenon when some members of a group don't carry their weight. If they never or rarely prepare, they become seen as hangers on and resentment can start to build in the group. Of course, working in a group is not all roses, and you have probably come across some difficulties and disadvantages. We list some typical problematic situations in Table 5.2. The difficult truths. Love them or hate them, the clean and simple truth is that you will need to learn to work in a group. At medical school, you will benefit from doing some of your study in a group, and for the rest of your professional life, you will be working in teams. The people in these teams will not always be people who you would choose for friends, but you will need to learn to value them for their strengths and recognize and support their areas of weakness, and they should do the same. For you, similarly, in study groups, you may not always work with people who are your friends, but you can still be amazingly productive. We hope that we have convinced you that you will need to work in groups, that there are advantages, and that it isn't always plain sailing. The rest of this chapter looks at how you might help the group to be as productive as possible. Roles within a group. Back in the 1980s, Dr. Raymond Meredith Belvin published his investigation of management teams in industry. His work identified that for a team to work productively, people took on different roles within the team, with some people taking on more than one role. He came up with some rather strange names for the different roles, which we will try and summarize here. As you read through them, see if you can identify with them from teams that you have worked or studied in. Table 5.3 Belvin's model of team roles. Chairman, coordinator. This role involves coordinating the others, delegating the right jobs to the right people, providing focus on the task. Shaper, motivator. Shapers tend to be full of enthusiasm and motivation for the task. They are keen to win and their passion overflows to others, they can be quite aggressive in their aim to achieve. Right? These are bright, intellectual lateral thinkers. They are great at coming up with ideas, different ways of doing things. Monitor, evaluator. People in this role are those who keep an eye on deadlines and progression towards them. They will think things through and propose the most sensible path. Often they are pragmatic and maybe a little cynical. Company worker. This is the role that gets the work done. They are loyal to the team and get the work done on time. Team worker. This role is interested in building the team spirit and keeping everything running smoothly. They are the diplomats and tend not to take sides. Completer finisher. This role is interesting. It involves producing a suitable finished product, dotting the I's and crossing the T's, checking the spelling. Ironically, their high standards can frustrate others and actually lead to delays in completion. Resource investigator. This role involves actively seeking out sources of information, external contacts, and building networks outside of the team. The interesting thing about Belbin's model is that not only can one person play more than one role within a team, but that they may play different roles in different teams. Also, people tend to have roles that they are good at and roles that they find more difficult. Imagine that you are a perfectionist who prefers to do things right. You will probably be comfortable putting things together into a final product and might be quite reasonable at many of the other roles too. But you will find it more difficult to delegate and so might find it harder work to fill a coordinator role. This Belbin model is not perfect and our brief description of it is rather superficial, but it does give a framework with which to look at a group that you are working in and consider some of the reasons that there might be challenges. Imagine the following scenario. 4 of you have been selected to produce a poster on health in the local community. If none of you take on the role of resource investigator, then how will you find the data that you need? If no one takes on a coordinator role, then how will you avoid everyone doing the same things? If everyone takes on a coordinator role, how will you ever agree on what needs to be done? If no one in the group has attention to keeping the team together, then who will ease things over when you can't agree on a background color for the poster? The Belbin roles allow you to do more than just understand why things are going wrong. You can actively use this framework to ensure that the group becomes productive. You might consciously decide to invite people to join the group who you think will fill in the gaps if you don't have an obsessive, compulsive proofreading completer. Finisher in the group and your posters tend to look rather chatty. Perhaps you could invite one to join you regardless of whether you like their company or not. You might use the Belbin framework to have a discussion in your group. Perhaps you are all keen to lead and none to follow if you can talk about this. Perhaps you could rotate the role of coordinator. You might also use the framework to personally think how you will work within the group. You are likely to be pretty good at 4 or more of the roles and probably reasonably good at another 2 or so. Imagine that no one in your group is very good at keeping the team spirit up. And you know that with some effort you can do that. You might decide to throw yourself into that role, even though it isn't your strongest preference. Watkins and Gibson-Sweet's article is a good starting point if you wish to read more. They even give a different analogy of teamwork, useful for those who find Belbin's roles too abstract. Group dynamic, group development. Groups don't start functioning at 100% capacity straight away. They often go through a rocky period in the first few meetings. You know this from experience, and Bruce Tuckman formally described it in 1965. He described 4 stages that a group goes through before they start performing. The strange thing about the model in Table 5.4 is that it appears to be true. Almost all groups seem to go through these stages, although some get stuck at one stage or another. The relevance to you is twofold. First, if on the second or third time your group meets, people seem to stop getting on, Perhaps they start talking each other down and argue a bit. Then you can be reassured that this tends to happen, and most groups will move on to start performing within a couple more meetings. In addition, though, you might think about how you might help a storming group to move on to a more productive stage. Your group tutor should also help, but your role within the group will put you in a position of influence. Consider what you have read about feedback and reflection and use this to provide feedback for the group and stimulate them to think about the processes going on. Examples might include, I notice that we tend to keep interrupting each other a lot and we seem to lose out on a lot of information by not listening. Could we think about some ground rules for the group? We seem to be getting along so well last week. I wonder what was different between then and now. Table 5.4 Bruce Tuckman's 4 stages of team development. Forming at this stage, members of the group are polite and try to understand each other and the unwritten rules within the group. They avoid conflict and their comments tend to be generic or ambiguous so as not to risk disagreement. Storming, the politeness ends here and the conflict begins. This might be conflict about the right way of pursuing the task or vying for leadership or respect within the group. Members are more willing to disagree and conflict may range from members talking each other down all the way to displays of anger. Norming, in this stage, the group has learnt the unspoken rules of how they will work together. They develop trust and respect and become a true team. Performing, having successfully navigated the previous 3 stages, the group becomes truly productive. Other factors affecting learning in a group. There is a lot of evidence from educational psychology that various factors other than development of group dynamic and roles within a group also influence the productivity of the group. In this section, we will list them, give brief descriptions and some practical suggestions. Products, goals. Goals that are more concrete tend to produce more interaction. So you might wish to help your group make its goals as concrete as possible. So to summarize, when we meet next Thursday, we will all be able to list all the causes of clubbing and we will construct a table of what other clinical features would point us to each of those diagnoses. Goals that are shared between members of the group tend to be better than goals that are divided up between individuals. Although the goals should be shared, individuals should still be accountable within the group. You might start a session going round members of the group to find out how they prepared for the session. Often this is in the form of people talking about what sources of information they found. The nature of the task itself seems important, with tasks that require everyone's input having a better effect on group interaction. Concept maps, for example, seem to be better than a poster or an essay that one person could make on their own. Work hard to ensure that everyone has input to the final product. Individual factors and positive interdependence. Although prior knowledge is important for a group to learn and grow effectively together, they should have a similar level of prior knowledge. We hinted at this when talking about the cons of group work. Although the members of the group don't need the same prior knowledge, clearly if one person is an expert and the others are novices, the session will become simply a teaching session at the cost of group motivation and the importance of debate, discussion, and elaboration. Try to ensure a similar level of prior knowledge, encourage members to do the study that they agreed before the session, and discourage those who try to read ahead of everyone else. Positive interdependence is a term used to mean that everyone in the group should require the others to complete the task or to complete the task well. Groups that appreciate that their results are better because of the different members of the group tend to continue to perform well. Try and ensure that the goals are owned by everyone. Help the group to consider the strengths of its members. Perhaps you could say something positive about everyone's contribution. Behavior within the group. If you read chapter 2, you will not be surprised that asking questions, elaboration, and trying to build links with other learning will result in deeper learning and better group performance. Ask questions, be curious, try and apply the knowledge that you are sharing, and try and link with other learning. Ensure that you are all actively learning in the group. Someone in my group kept asking why, and we really found it irritating to begin with. She persevered, and suddenly we realized that we couldn't really explain the things we were saying. We didn't understand as deeply as we had thought. We were quite shocked and had to go back to the books. I now think that why is one of the most powerful questions. Jason, third year graduate entrance program student. Whereas emotional conflict can be quite destructive in a group, cognitive conflict can help ensure deep learning and a common understanding. Cognitive conflict refers to a disagreement on a thinking rather than an emotional level, and it tends to stimulate motivation, curiosity, and reflection. Ask questions that will stimulate curiosity and challenge fixed views, such as if, as we read, that fasting blood glucose of greater than or equal to 7.0 mmol diagnoses diabetes, but why 7.0 rather than 6.9 or 7.2? I love a good debate, and so did the others in my group. We learnt a lot by disagreeing with each other. Abdul, final year medical student. Interestingly, the more that the interaction in the group is structured, the better the learning outcomes tend to be. This might well be part of the advantages of some of the highly structured models of collaborative learning, such as problem-based learning, but it can also work to your advantage in less formal settings. Consider setting some ground rules for how the group wants to work. Perhaps for revision sessions, you will agree to always start with a brainstorming session on the topic, followed by a review of the learning objectives set by the school. And you follow that up with making up some questions individually and trying to write model answers for them as a group. You will find these sessions much more productive than just turning up to revise diabetes. Understanding other people's point of view is one of the most important parts of working in a group. We talked about empathy with patients in the chapter on clinical communication, and empathy with others in your study group is just as important. Often emotional conflicts occur because individuals are more interested in pushing their own point of view rather than truly trying to build a consensus. For a consensus to form, everyone needs to see each other's perspective and try and see how it relates to each of the other members' perspective. If you find that the conversation keeps jumping, student A makes point X. Student B makes point Y, which is unrelated to point X, and student C interrupts to make a different point. Then try proposing this simple exercise. Whenever anyone speaks, they summarize what the last person said and build on it. Give it a try. It is harder than it sounds. If different opinions are flying wildly around the group, consider stepping out of your own opinions and into a facilitative role. For example, this is interesting. We seem to have three different opinions here. If I can just summarize where I think we are at, Jacob seems to argue heavily that prostitution should be legalized so that it can be regulated, but Melili thinks that this will just encourage an explosion in an already crime-ridden area. It seems to me that there was also a second debate more focused on the women themselves, with Peter keen that they become destigmatized and supported, and I think the only way that he saw this happening was through legalization. Could we agree that that summary is broadly what we have covered so far? Okay, so should we brainstorm what we know about regulation, association with crime, and stigmatization in prostitution? You won't be surprised to hear that just with individual learning. Group learning is driven by motivation. Some are motivated externally, whereas others are driven by interest in the topic or the feeling of unity with the group or by the interactions and cognitive conflicts within the group. If you can maximize this motivation in yourself and others, the group is more likely to be productive. Consider talking about what motivates you and starting a discussion. If everyone knows that you are interested, especially in pure science, and another group member is more motivated by relevance to patient care, then you can make sure that your discussions are tailored for both of you. Special cases, problem-based learning. Problem-based learning is simply a structured way of going about group work. There is some evidence that students who learn in this way are more highly motivated, learn more deeply, and integrate their knowledge together more effectively. Because of this, there are plenty of medical schools where the vast majority of the information that students learn is learned through PBL. Your school might be one of them. Medical educationalists are passionate about PBL, and it probably goes without saying there are lots of different flavors of PBL with their different proponents arguing that theirs is the right way. Some schools use the term case-based learning to refer to the sort of learning that we are talking about here, but others use case-based learning to mean something rather different. The PBL group is made up of students and a tutor. There are perhaps 6 to 8 students in a group, sometimes more, and one takes the role of chairperson. This chair keeps order, guides the group through the steps of PBL, and ensures that everyone has their say. A different student takes the role of scribe, writing things up on a board, usually a whiteboard, and capturing the discussion. The scribe has quite a position of power and of responsibility as they can direct how things go by the way that they write things down. Innovative scribes who use colors, concept maps, flow diagrams tend to drive innovation in the group. Scribes who just tend to write lists can sometimes have a very negative effect on the group. The most remarkable thing about PBL is the role of the tutor. The tutor does not teach. He or she should act as a facilitator only, keeping in the background, supporting the chair and scribe, occasionally asking a question or nudging the topic gently one way or another, and sometimes challenging unhelpful group behaviors. The learning in the group centers on a problem and a structured way of thinking about that problem. The problem itself is usually something relevant to the topic and often relates to a realistic context. Good problems should stimulate curiosity and motivation and make the students puzzled, keen to find a solution. Good problems should be difficult or even impossible to solve. The learning comes in thinking and debating and reading and testing hypotheses, not in finding the right answer. We stated that there were different flavors of PBL. Here we will run through the 7-jump process that is used in many medical schools in the UK. It came to the UK from Canada via Maastricht in the Netherlands, and there is a huge amount of educational research about it. If you are interested, try putting problem-based learning into a PubMed search. Step 1. Clarifying terms. This is an interesting step. The group reads through the problem statement, which is often a paragraph or more, and identify any words or phrases that anyone in the group doesn't understand fully. Either other members of the group can help provide a definition, or the group can list the word or statement as something that they will need to look up. Clearly, this is an important step because the group needs to have the same understanding of the words in the problem to be able to discuss it. But in addition, in some research at Barts and the London and King's, we have found that this stage seems to help allow students to feel safe to admit not knowing right at the beginning of the session. This was valued and felt to be different from a tutor-led tutorial. Step 2. Define the issues. In this step, the students try and list as many issues as they can see in the problem. Perhaps what is diabetes? Why was this patient started on insulin? What would have happened if she hadn't had treatment? Why didn't she take her insulin as prescribed? Etc. There are often main issues and sub-issues. Sometimes there are a number of different angles. Note that many texts use the word problems rather than issues for this step, but we have noticed that this can cause confusion between the initial problem and then breaking that down into further problems. If you see what we mean. We will stick with issues for clarity. Step 3. Brainstorm, analyze the issues. Here the group takes each issue in chart and brainstorms freely on what they know about it. Personal experience, prior knowledge, even hunches are fine. The brainstorm doesn't need to be structured, it is just about making an inventory of the group's knowledge. You might remember from chapter 2 that new knowledge is linked to old knowledge in the long-term memory, and that for deep learning to occur, that old knowledge, prior knowledge, needs to be activated. There is a fair amount of evidence that this step really does lead to better retention of facts later. The scribe aims to capture all these thoughts on the board, and a good chairperson will make sure that they manage by summarizing, guiding, and preventing everyone from talking at once. Step 4. Organize ideas. Here the group, often with a lot of help from the scribe, look at the knowledge that they have on the board and try and make sense of it, often by clustering information together. The issues tend to be ignored here and the information reorganized and hypotheses are built. This helps link and integrate knowledge across domains, which has been shown to improve retention and recall. Interestingly, even if the hypotheses are wrong, when students later discover that they are wrong, they still learn the right things much better than if they had just read the books without trying to get their thoughts together first. Step 5. Generating learning objectives. Step 4 will reveal some areas that the group are strong in, that they are sure of, and will also reveal gaps. In our example, the group might well know what diabetes is and how it is defined and diagnosed, but they might realize that they are unable to explain how glucose causes all the complications of diabetes at the cellular, molecular level. They might be uncertain of what all the possible complications of diabetes are, and they might realize that they are curious about how people adapt to a new diagnosis of diabetes and what factors help and hinder positive adaptation. They have therefore generated 4 learning objectives. They might fine-tune these to be more specific so that everyone is sure what they will be required to answer when they next meet. Often the facilitator will have a hidden agenda of some areas that need to be covered for the curriculum. As a group or as an individual, you might generate extra objectives above and beyond what is expected. Perhaps you are interested or curious about something, or perhaps your discussions identified a gap in your knowledge that you need to fill. Step 6. Self-study. Students study for all objectives on their own. They usually read more widely, but the objectives that they generated guide their study, and at the least they should be able to answer all the objectives that they had agreed as a group. Sources might include books, journal articles, and other formal learning materials. More subjective sources might have some value too, expert opinion, and of course the internet, but these sources should be used sparingly. As always, be careful with the internet. See chapter 2, page 33 for some tips on judging the quality of a website. Ideally, you should look at a wide variety of sources and evaluate, triangulate what they say. Step 7. Reporting back. This step usually happens a few days or a week later. It has the same chair and the same scribe. Often it starts with students going round saying where they found their information. Then each learning objective is taken in turn and the group explain it, often with one student taking a lead for each objectives. If you have a good facilitator, they might ask you sideways questions to help you elaborate your knowledge and to help you to see whether you really have understood it as much as you thought you had. Even though you will have done all your homework on your own, this step helps you learn through teaching, explaining. It also helps you learn through questioning and applying. It allows you to measure the depth and breadth of knowledge that you have learnt against your peers and is fantastic for motivation, making problem-based learning work for you. We have written quite a bit about PBL, and in doing so, we hope that you can see 2 clear messages that are often misunderstood. First, the process is not about generating objectives, it is about maximizing subsequent learning and recall. Some institutions actually give the suggested objectives at the beginning of the session, and the students still benefit in terms of relevance, motivation, and learning from going through the process. Unfortunately, this approach is rare, and the hidden nature of the objectives often makes them seem the only important thing. Our second point is simple. Everything that you read in the first half of this chapter applies here. Problem-based learning is simply a structured way of going about group work. If you think about the things we covered in the first half of this chapter and how they influence the way the group works, you will be two-thirds of the way to producing a more productive group. Study groups tend to be groups that students set up themselves in order to learn. Some are more formal than others, but the productive ones tend to follow rules, whether spoken out loud or unwritten. There are usually ground rules about behavior, clinical skills, and clinical communication skills. We have discussed how students' own study groups can help development of skills in chapters 3 and 4. Remember that to learn any skill, you need to know how to do it, you need to practice, and you need feedback. The two key messages that we want to highlight here are ensuring your learning is active learning and giving and receiving feedback. Active learning takes two forms, either doing or by actively observing. You can learn a lot from watching someone else perform a skill that you are learning. Watch attentively and think about what you are learning from doing so. There is no point in being there if you can't see what is going on. Feedback is, of course, essential. Giving constructive feedback to the other members of your group will help them learn and will keep the group together. Be sure that you are willing to receive feedback from your peers too. Ask for it and pursue it until you get the feedback that you need. Interprofessional education. As a doctor, you will be expected to work closely with other professions, nurses, physiotherapists, dietitians, midwives. The list is a long one. Many medical schools introduce some interprofessional learning, often in small groups, within their curricula to try and help students prepare for interprofessional working later on in life. The aim of such sessions is to help you learn with, from, and about each other, and on paper they seem like a great idea. In practice, it can be touch and go whether such sessions are useful or not. In her review of interprofessional education, Della Freeth argues convincingly that IPE is simply a special case of professional education, so knowledge about good practice in learning and teaching in a wide range of contexts can be applied directly to IPE, and we agree. To make IPE work, you can apply the contents of this chapter just as with any other form of group work. If you are aware of roles within the group, of how the group dynamic develops and how you can help it grow, if you pay attention to the behaviors within the group and are truly curious about other people's point of view and all the other things that we have covered, then IPE will work well for you. Summary: studying, learning, and working in a group is essential, and there are many different advantages to doing so. Indeed, some medical schools' entire curriculum is based on group work. There are also challenges along the way. In this chapter, we have tried to highlight the following factors which are under your influence to help you make group work for you. They apply across any and every form of group work. You won't get it right every time, but we believe strongly that if you are aware of these factors, you reflect on them and invest some perseverance, that you will succeed. Roles within the group: do you have a good spread? If not, what can you do about it? Development of group dynamic: how can you ease the group through the stages to start performing? Goals: are your goals concrete enough? Are they shared? Do they help encourage or discourage collaboration? Individual factors: are you all at a reasonably similar level? Do you appreciate each other's knowledge and skills? Behaviors: does the group ask questions, build links, elaborate knowledge? How about cognitive conflict and debate? Is it welcomed? How structured is the process? Would more structure help? Are different points of view valued? What does the group do to maximize motivation in its members? Questions and answers. Hugh, I can't work in a group. To be brutally honest, there is no one I really like in my year, no one that I really want to spend time with. I am a mature student and all my friends are from outside medical school. Hey, this is a common area of confusion. You do not need to marry people that you study with. They do not need to be your friends. Indeed, sometimes it helps if they are not, especially if you tend to laugh about with your friends. Hugh, everyone in my group keeps shouting each other down. We seem to get nowhere. What can I do? 8. This might be a normal stage of development of a group. So if it is a one-off, perhaps you should just hang in there. If it has been going on for a while, have you discussed this in the group? Perhaps you could agree some simple ground rules. You might want to seek out some expert advice from a respected, experienced facilitator in the medical school. They are bound to have some tips that will help. Hugh, I hate IPE. What's the point? What could I learn from a nurse? A. We know that most major medical errors occur when professions don't communicate effectively and work together, therefore. If you think that there is no point communicating effectively with different professions, then medicine is probably not for you. It is not easy though. It requires a commitment to try and understand someone else's point of view and a large amount of ongoing effort. The desired outcome is excellent patient care through good interprofessional team working, and with this end in sight, the point becomes clearer. Hugh, not much group work happens in my medical school. How can I convince people to get a group together? A. Lots of people in your year will be feeling the same as you right now. You might want to summarize the start of this chapter and talk to those around you. The fact that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts might be a particularly good selling point. Having and communicating a clear structure for the first sessions and a clearly understood objective that people can prepare for will make those first few sessions more likely to succeed. Then the ball will be rolling.